Grippers made by Microjig. They're a push block. I know you've seen these. They're yellow and green. They look like they're made out of Legos. Are these things a tool or just a toy?
I'm here with the Smart Wood Shop at the 2019 AWFS, the biggest woodworker convention, I think, in the world.
I brought both pieces back around so I can pick up my part here instead of reaching across the spinning blade. You get a very high quality cut on both the rip and the off-fall side of the part. But the safety is the primary factor here. We're going to keep your hands away from bits and blades that want to bite them.
Well, you may see a set of these in the Smart Wood Shop here coming pretty soon.
This is not a sales promotion to encourage you to buy these. This is not sponsored. It is also not a tutorial to teach you how to use them. Rather, this is just my perspective here in the Smart Wood Shop, where I don't like to have any extra tools. So things like this, I biased away from them. Like you, I'm sure I've seen lots of ads for these over the years. And I've never really been drawn to them. I'm not usually drawn to a lot of the little add-on tools and the extras because they just become something else to fill up a drawer that I may not use enough, that they might be good for a specific thing, but in my production and day in and day out and being lean, they just don't fit my philosophy. That isn't true about everything. There are definitely some tools that are designed specifically to leverage other tools I have, and I've found them to be extremely useful to me and help me to remain lean and remain efficient, even though they are taking up some space. These never reached that point with me. I was at a woodworker show a few years ago, and I posted a video here on this channel where I went to their booth and I talked to the guy demonstrating it. He did his whole demonstration, and it was pretty impressive. He even offered some of these to the Smart Wood Shop, and I was going to do it, but I never followed through. It's been about a year, maybe slightly less. I got these from TSO. Thought I'd just check them out in the shop, not really talk about them until I figured out whether I was going to use them or not. The last couple of weeks, I've been intensely working on a project of updating the Smart Cart. And I got these new wheels that deploy differently, and it's allowing me to redesign, and I'm having to do a lot of prototyping. And so I've been doing a lot of ripping, a lot of cutting, a lot of just making little pieces. And these are always right here beside my table saw. I use these almost every time that I use the table saw for a couple of reasons. One is the safety / control. Because of the control this gives me on the pieces I'm putting through, particularly smaller pieces, I'm really confident in holding the piece and moving it past the blade and not having it kick back on me or have my hand come in contact with the blade. I have a SawStop saw. I'm not going to get cut if my hand comes in contact with the blade. That isn't the purpose of the brake. It's that secondary feature that comes along. It's like a parachute. You want the plane to keep flying. So I want the table saw to be used properly. Having control and using the proper tools is a way to do that. So safety and control. The other one is quality of the cut. I have noticed when I rip, the cut that I get has no saw marks. It's very clean. It's almost like it's been run through a jointer. It's really shining with small stuff, giving you that control, that safety, and the quality of the cut. When you're working with smaller pieces, narrow rips, or just really short pieces, the way these bite down and work, there's a couple of adjustments to make when I'm setting up, and I lean away from that stuff. I tend to like things to be fixed in place. I don't like adjustments a lot, but this is one of those situations where they've done a good job. They've made it easy. Nice green knob so I know right where to grab. And there's really only two adjustments that I make. That's up and down with this, I'm going to call it a stability plate. That depends on the thickness of material. And then this, I think it's about a 1-inch wide foot here, where I move that around both for traction, holding it down, and also to make sure that the blade has clearance to go through. So it really depends on what I'm cutting. So I'll rip this piece of plywood through at 3 inches. So I've set the blade just above the thickness there. Most of the material I rip is 18 millimeter 3/4. So these pretty much are always defaulted to that depth. If I'm ripping a little bit wider stock like this, then I'd lift those all the way up because I'm going to want that to sit flat on the material. I don't want to be all the way out here. And the only other thing I want to check is to make sure that the blade is going to go in one of these grooves And in fact, it's good right where it is. So that's going to give me this traction with this 1-inch wide piece on the inside of the blade, and then I'm going to have the traction on this about 1/2 inch wide foot on the outside. Saw in that rip that I was able to carry both sides of the cut all the way through and past the blade and bring them around. So that control, again, safety, less chance of a kickback, but also the cleanliness of the cut, the smoothness of the cut, almost as if it was run through a jointer. When you're pushing wood through a saw, a table saw, every time you hesitate, you're going to get a little bit of a saw mark at that point. Not bad, it's something that can be sanded out, and a lot of times it won't even matter. But this just gives you that very clean cut. So if you're going to use it for glue ups or anything, this is really handy. Let's see how that control works on narrow rips. Absolutely clean and no saw marks at all. Where I find these really shine is those very narrow rips. Just like the others, precise, parallel all the way down, no saw mark. As a general contractor, I've built over 200 homes from ground up, brand new homes, as well as so many remodels, I can't even count. Putting in flooring is a big part of that. My favorite flooring is a nailed down, actually my very favorite is a nailed down sand and finish hardwood. Second to that is a pre-finished nailed down. I much prefer them to like these luxury vinyls and these floating woods. Although when you're working with concrete floors, like a lot of houses here in Florida, and like the Florida Fixer, you're kind of stuck with those. With all of the hardwood that I've put in, one thing that I've never done, I can't bring myself to do it, is to put one of those transitions in that go over the top. I always do my transitions if I do a change of direction, or if I have a transition under a doorway, I usually will make that transition from a piece of the hardwood that I have. And the way I do that often is to cut my own groove in it, so I'll rip it out of the material, some of the other rips along the way. I'll make the groove. I have all the different bits to match up with the various tongue and grooves out there. And then I will make a spline. So this would have been excellent. I didn't have these back then, but I did rip my splines on the table saw. You know, they would have the saw cuts, and they're a little dangerous because they want to kind of vibrate and they want to sort of break. Having these in that control would have been really nice. By the way, that whole transition thing, that carries through for scribe moldings, and if you go back and watch the video where I put in the luxury vinyl in the Florida Fixer and I came up to the tile where the status quo is to buy the transition that they make to match the material, and it goes over the top, and I couldn't do it there either. I figured out a way to bring the material up gradually and get it to flush and have a grout line across there. Again, it's same with cabinets, putting them into the wall. I can't do scribe moldings. I have to do the fillers and taper cut and fit to the drywall. Maybe it was my early training days and I lucked out being having my teeth cut with master craftsmen that taught me how to cope and to fit rather than to just slam it in and then try to cover up the poor fit of things. Enough of my philosophy, back to the grippers. When I'm cutting that spline, typically it's not going to be a full 3/4 or the thickness of the material. So once I rip the thickness, and typically it's not going to be a 1/4 either, it'll be a little narrower than this, then I need to turn it flat and rip it whatever dimension I figure out on the job. But it would have been about 3/16, slightly less, and it would have been around 5/8. And then I run them through the router table and round over all 4 edges. So can the grippers handle that? Let's check it out. What gets tricky is holding it down solid all the way through, because this is where the blade wants to pick it up and kind of shatter it. By the way, notice that I stand off to the side. This has nothing to do with the grippers. Material can be picked up by that blade and shot back at an incredible force. I just don't want to be in front of it to get speared with it or hit in the face. Regardless of the grippers or any other block, I'm always going to stand off to the side. This is where that stability foot really comes in handy with this real narrow rips. I don't want to be trying to balance this thing on there as I walk through it. That's a little less control. With this, I'm able to hold it flat right on the saw and put my pressure straight down and push through. And again, without having it tip on me. I had total control through the entire rip, so there wasn't any safety issues, and again, a really clean cut. We've already ripped it to a quarter. Let's go a quarter by a quarter. That's impressive. Again, a clean cut, always in control, all the way through. Let's try an 1/8 by an 1/8. Eighth by an 1/8, now that's impressive. And in fact, these have a very practical purpose in remodeling. Doors in older homes are in all kinds of conditions. And one of the typical things that I ran into, their hinges were loose. The screws had pulled out of the jamb a bit and the hinges were flopping around. I would take matchsticks. I kept a big box of kitchen matches, wooden stick matches, and I would put some glue on them and pound them in the holes and then shear them off. And then I could re-tap that and put in a new screw, even new hinges often, without having the jamb all messed up. These actually work a little bit better than the matchstick because they're at 1/8 by an 1/8, which is a little bit bigger. Now that I'm set up, I'll cut a bunch more of these, then I'll cut them in half, stack them all together, put a rubber band around them, toss them in the Smart Wood Shop. For me in the Smart Wood Shop, these are definitely a tool, not a toy. I highly recommend them. If you enjoy this kind of video where I'm not really reviewing a tool or giving a tutorial or making a sales pitch, I'm rather just talking through a tool that I'm using, that I use in the Smart Wood Shop, and show you, demonstrate it a little bit, but really kind of talk you through my perception on it. If that is helpful, then make sure you give this video a thumbs up. And also in the comment section below, let me know what you thought, and if there are any other tools you see me using that you want me to do the same thing with. If you'd like to get a detailed set of plans to build yourself a smart station, a smart bench, any of the accessories that work with the system or the Smart Wood Shop, there's a link in the description of this video down below. You can go and purchase plans 24/7, 365 and download them immediately. Mahalo.